الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. So tonight inshallah ta'ala we'll continue discussing about Mukhtasar Saheeh Al-Bukhari by Zabidi Ali rahmatullahi ta'ala. So we'll be picking up from Salat, as I mentioned, Kitab Mawaqid as-Salat. So we're discussing concerning the Mawaqid, the timing of the Salat. So in the last lesson that we had started discussing Salatul Asr. So also he mentioned other points regarding as-Salat al-Asr or Salat al-Asr. So we'll continue with that particular hadith.
Bismillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah. Qala ma'allif rahimahullah. Chapter 10. The one who misses the Asr Salah intentionally. Hadith 341 narrated by Ibn Omar radiallahu anhuma. Allah's Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, whoever misses the Asr Salah intentionally, then it is as if he has lost his family and property.
That's the hadith, huh? One hadith?
No.
So they mentioned regarding this heading, as you mentioned, ithm. So in the Arabic text, it mentioned ithm man fatatu al-asr. That there's an ithm, there's a sin for the one who misses Salat al-Asr. Then they mentioned the hadith of Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu anhuma, where the Prophet ﷺ قال الذي تفوته الصلاة العصر تفوته صلاة العصر كأنما فتيت أو وترت أهله وماله الحديث. So as for this particular hadith, within those those matters that are covered regarding the Salatul Asr. So this hadith they mentioned here regarding concerning this hadith, when they mention certain points. So you have a few points that to be mentioned. That one is meant by wutir. So they mentioned that كأنما وتر أهله وماله. So what is meant by this? So the ulama mentioned a word concerning al-wutar or witr, that in this context mean an-naqs, that the person an-naqs. So what is intended an-naqs? So there is some deficiency in the person, so that there's some shortcomings or deficiency in one's salat. So they mentioned that so this word that they mean either al-akhada, that a person's salat or it has been taken, or dhahaba, or it has been lost. So you have different explanation have been given regarding this. Ibn Abdul Barr, he mentioned that wutir usib fi ahli wa mali, that the person has been affected by way of his family and also his mal. So that's concerning the word that they mentioned here regarding al-wutr. Then as for the hadith, that what can be mentioned, that they state regarding this hadith, then the Prophet ﷺ kind of somewhat is cautioning regarding that the severity of the person who missed Salatul Asr. Then the ulama, they have a discussion between the ulama as to when it mentioned الَّذِي تَفُوتُهُ Salatul Asr. What does this mean? So what does this mean? The person who have missed Salatul Asr, then the consequence of this is that the person, as if he has lost his family and his wealth and he's on his own. So as if the person has lost his family and his belongings and he's now left on his own for the person missing Salatul Asr. So the discussion between the ulama, we have a khilaf between the ulama, what is meant by الَّذِي تَفُوتُهُ Salatul Asr, that a person have missed Salatul Asr. So you have different aqwal between the ulama, that of those who have mentioned that what is intended is that concerning that the Prophet Islam, that it meant regarding concerning that is a caution a person, that the person having يتوجه عليه الندم, that a person that he should be sorry that for what he has done. So the hadith is somewhat for a person to feel somewhat sorry for what he has done. Also they have mentioned a person tafuto yani al-ajr, that a person who have missed the salat, they meant concerning that the person have missed the ajr of Salatul Asr. Then of others who mentioned that the person, if it was the person who have missed Salatul Asr, doesn't the same thing apply to all of the salat? So the person that tafutuhu Salatul Asr, that I mentioned if it's meant by this the person have missed Salatul Asr, then this by way of the person missed that as they mentioned regarding either the person have missed they said al-waqt al-mukhtar. So for Salatul Asr, they mentioned there's a waqt al-mukhtar, that if the person was to miss that more preferable time, that a person should pray within that time, that the person who get this particular, that this applies to him. Others who mentioned that is the person who completely missed the time of Salatul Asr. So the person who missed the complete time of Salatul Asr, then the person as if he has lost his family and his property. those who mention between the, amongst the ulama that what is what is intended is that the person who have missed it regards that amdan or amidan, the person who intentionally miss the time of Salatul Asr, then this is the person who this wa'id is upon them. Ibn Ajr and others mentioned the hadith and somewhat taglit. That the Prophet ﷺ, when he mentioned these words, أَلَّا يَتَفُوتُهُ Salatul Asr, that what is meant by this at-taglit, that can somewhat being very stern and harsh against the person who is somewhat complacent regarding his salat. So different aqwal or what is mentioned by the ulama as to the person who this hadith it applies to. So you have those aqwal that are mentioned by the ulama. So as we mentioned, that of those who are more inclined towards the person who amidan, the person who intentionally choose to be complacent regarding Salat al-Asr until it is lost. And I mentioned here the entire time. So he missed the entire time of Salat al-Asr, then this is a person that is intended. As they mentioned, that some mention that is not per se the person who have missed the most al-waqt al-mukhtar, the more preferred time for the person to pray Salat al-Asr, that as that is not what is intended, as the person still prays Salat al-Asr within his time. And as for the punishment, it is somewhat severe for the person who still prayed within his time. So they mentioned that what is meant is taglit, kind of somewhat being very stern and harsh against a person who's complacent regarding his salat until the waqt have passed. So that's concerning. So they mentioned regarding overall that this hadith that it mentioned tahdhir min fawat Salat al-Asr, that is somewhat a caution, a severe caution against a person who somewhat missed Salatul Asr, the timing for Salatul Asr, or the Salat itself. And also it shows regarding that, the musibah, that also the calamity that a person fall into, which is by the person missing of Salatul Asr, where he lose a deficiency regarding his family and his wealth, or he has missed his family and his wealth and he's left on his own. So you have those aqwa that I mentioned, and also it shows regarding the person that the thing that may have caused this, they say things of the dunya, or whatever the reason may be. So it showed that also they mentioned that from this hadith, that things of the things regarding a deen, that it kind of somewhat, it carries it's given precedent over things of the dunya, as ahluhu wa maluhu is things of the dunya. So the person's family and his wealth is affairs of the dunya. So it shows regarding that alladhi fatahu as-salatul asr, that the person missing salatul asr, that he should give matters regarding the deen precedent over things of the dunya, and also things of the deen can impact on the person's dunya. So the person who falls short in matters of the deen, and in this case he does not pray salatul asr in its correct time, then the person can lose regarding things of his it can impact on his family and his wealth. So they mentioned that with this it shows regarding that matters of the deen can impact on the person's dunya. So it's concerning what is mentioned regarding, or what can be taken from this particular hadith. The thing that they also discuss, which we'll discuss in the next hadith, they mentioned that's concerning, we discuss in the next hadith. So that's concerning of generally what is mentioned regarding that this matter of the ulama. They kind of somewhat they mentioned that why this hadith, or why the Prophet ﷺ state this about this hadith, why this severe warning is mentioned regarding this particular hadith, where Ibn Abdul Bar rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentioned that yahtamil, that was the possibility, it seems that the Prophet ﷺ, why can I somewhat specify of Salatul Asr, because he was asked about Salatul Asr. So he was asked about Salatul Asr, so that is why concerning the response is related to Salatul Asr, because seems as if, or possibility that he was asked regarding this particular Salat. But I mentioned that what is mentioned regarding the person, that a general caution against the person being complacent regarding all this Salah, whether Salatul Asr or any other Salat, which is compulsory. So a general caution about the person being complacent regarding any Salat, and in this case a Salatul Asr somewhat have been mentioned specifically. Then you have a discussion between the ulama, as was mentioned, regarding concern of like a tartib as to which salat is said to be amongst the compulsory salat, which is said to be afdaliyah, which salat is said to be the more preferred amongst the compulsory salat. So of the ulama who mentioned that based upon hadith like of this nature, and the one that will follow next, and others, that they of the view that Salatul Asr of amongst the compulsory salawat, that is the most preferred of the salawat, amongst the compulsory. So amongst the compulsory salat, Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, Isha, that they all that Salat al-Asr, that it is the more preferred amongst those salawat. Is the more preferred amongst those salah. So that's concerning what is mentioned regarding this particular hadith. Aywa, then we mention next hadith.
قال المؤلف رحمه الله, chapter 11, the one who admits does not offer the Asr Salah intentionally. Hadith 341, narrated by Buraidah radiallahu anhu, on a cloudy day.
That's the hadith? No, that's not the hadith.
No.
That's the hadith after. There's a hadith before. Hadith Buraidah.
نعم هذا هو. طيب. On a cloudy day, offer the Asr Salah early, as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, whoever omits the Asr prayer, all his good deeds will be lost.
Hey. Okay. So that's hadith of Buraidah that is mentioned. So again, this matter regarding Salat al-Asr. And of all the matter discussed regarding that, you find this hadith that mentioned regarding the excellence of Salat al-Asr, as we had mentioned before, that a discussion as to amongst the compulsory salawat, which is said to be the most virtuous. So of those who incline towards that, the ones that are said to be, that those mentioned that, from the text that have been mentioned, that what seems to be the most virtuous, Salatul, they mentioned that you have like, for each Salat, you have like a hadith that speaks of their, or mention their excellence. Salatul Fajr, Salat Isha, and the like, Salatul Asr. So they mentioned that as for the one they believe, or some hold to be the more preferred, that they put Salatul Asr, then Salatul Fajr. So they mentioned that Salatul Fajr, then Salatul Asr, then Salat al-Fajr. And they mentioned regarding concerning of the why they believe concerning as these hadith kind of somewhat indicate that the excellence of Salatul Asr amongst the compulsory. They mentioned this particular hadith and the one that we mentioned before and others. And after that they mentioned that Allah subhanahu mentioned وَحَافِظُوا عَلَى صَلَوَاتِ الْوُسْطَى وَحَافِظُوا عَلَى الصَّلَوَاتِ وَالصَّلَاةِ الْوُسْطَى حَافِظُوا عَلى الصَّلَوَاتِ وَالصَّلَاةِ الْوُسْطَى. So Allah mentioned that you should preserve the salawat. Then they mentioned and Salatul Wusta. They have a discussion regarding which salat is Salatul Wusta. So they mentioned that proof regarding concerning the excellence of that particular salat. And the ulama mentioned that regarding identifying which is Salat al-Wusta, that they have over 20 plus aqwal. They have over 20 something aqwal as to which is Salat al-Wusta. So a long discussion. So of those views that said that Jumhur of the ulama are majority more inclined regarding ta'id as to specifying which is Salat al-Wusta, as we said that over 20 views, That the more popular view are the more said the qawl of Jumhur, that they mentioned as Salat al-Asr. The Salat al-Wusta is Salat al-Asr. As they said, as Salat al-Asr, that is the middle Salat. Before it, we have Fajr and Dhuhr, and after it, there's Maghrib and Isha. So it becomes the one which is like the center Salat. It becomes the center Salat. So before it, Dhuhr and Asr, 2 Salat. And after there's 2 other salat, Maghrib, Isha, so it becomes a Salatul Wusta. So I've said that the view taken by amongst some of the ulama of that view, amongst them the qawl Ahnaf, they mentioned Ba'd the Malikiyah, the view of the Shafi'iyah, the Hanabila, Dawood and Ibn Hazm, amongst the Zahiriyah and others, amongst the Sahaba or Tabi'een. That and of those who are more inclined towards that is the more correct view of the ulama that mentioned that the more correct view that as-Salatul Wusta. Salat al-Wusta, it is Salat, or the middle Salat, it is Salat al-Asr. And I mentioned that all these type of texts can somewhat show the excellence of Salat al-Asr. Then you have other aqwal, Salat al-Subh, Salat al-Dhuhr, of other ulama mentioned that Salat al-Wusta, they see it as Asr and Subh. They kind of combine between both. Of those who mentioned Salat al-Isha, of those who mentioned Annahu Mubham, it is Salat which is unknown. It's somewhat not specified, so they see it as something which is unknown. Not specifying a particular salat. Amongst of the ulama who mentioned that Salat al-Wusta is the Salawatul Khams. Of those who mentioned it is Salawatul Khams. Also others mentioned Salat al-Wusta, it is Salatul Juma. So Salatul Wusta, Salatul Juma, some even mentioned it is Salatul Witr. So of the ulama that incline or take the view that it is Salat al-Witr. So you have many aqwal, Salatul Isha wa Salatul Subh Mahan. That so you have different aqwal between the ulama as to which is as-Salat al-Wusta. But we said that Jumhur of the ulama that they are more inclined or of the view that as Salat al-Wusta, it is Salat al-Asr. So with this matter, they mentioned that these ahadith can somewhat for them reinforce that Salat al-Asr, it is the Salat al-Wusta. So they mentioned the hadith of Buraidah, where the Prophet of Islam in this hadith can somewhat Bakkaru, they mentioned Bakkaru, yani be early, be Salat al-Asr. So they mentioned that from this Bakkaru, that for the person somewhat, it about hasten or be early in perform Salat al-Asr. So as we had mentioned before, that for the salawat, that what is ideal and more preferred, that one pray the salawat, the composed salat in their earliest time. So this hadith can somewhat with Salat al-Asr support that Salat al-Asr, it should be prayed in its earliest time possible. And we had mentioned before regarding that with Ahnaf, compared to Jumhur of the ulama, that they disagree as to what time Salat al-Asr to be prayed. So I mentioned before that the Ahnaf all concerned that Salat al-Asr, that it's all concerning and yakun kulli shay mithlayhi, that the zil kulli shay mithlayhi, that the sun or the shadow should be of double length, where Jumhur all it should be only of similar length, of one length, not of two lengths, as claimed by the Ahnaf. So you find the Ahnaf generally Salat is much later for Salat al-Asr. But we mentioned that from this is show regarding that the person prays Salat al-Asr as soon as it enters. So this hadith can somewhat support this. Then the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned the hadith regarding the matter, then he says, Man taraka Salat al-Asr, that show regarding Man taraka Salat al-Asr, and we mentioned that what is meant by the Man taraka Salat al-Asr, faqad habita amalu, that the one who have left or leave Salat al-Asr, then the person actions, the person deeds, that they're invalid. The person deeds are invalid. So the ulama, they have again a khilaf between the ulama as to what is meant by, as the Prophet mentioned, man taraka Salat al-Asr, what is meant by the person leaving Salat al-Asr. So of those who mentioned again that what is meant that a person that is somewhat become complacent until the time is passed, and the person was able to pray. So the person had the ability and everything for him to perform Salat al-Asr, but then he, due to his negligence and complacency, that he the Salat time, he missed that Salat. So they mentioned that is the person that fall into this. Of those who mentioned that of what is meant by this is that the person that who amdan, the person who intentionally leave the Salah. The one who intentionally leave the Salat, then this is what is meant, or the person that is intended in this particular case. Again, Ibn Hajar and others mentioned that in this case concerning that is concerning min bab al-taghlid. It's about being stern and harsh against a person who leave the Salah. Being harsh against a person regarding that a stern warning for a person not to leave the Salat. Because if one was to do so, this is the consequence. This is the consequence if the person who leave this particular Salat al-Asr. So you have that khilaf between the ulama as to is it for a person who just been complacent, or is it meant the person who is amdan, intentionally leave his, did not pray Salat al-Asr. So you have that discussion between the ulama. Then as they mentioned that, then they discussed concerning that habitat amaluhu, what is meant by this. The person actions are invalid. So they mentioned that as for the person whose action is invalid, is the person that is those action that relates to one, the person not praying Asr, and anything in between. Those actions are invalid. So from the time of Asr, the time that he missed, so anything in between, all those actions are considered to be invalid. All those acts are considered to be invalid because that's the consequence of the person not missing Salat al-Asr. So everything in between that time, it is invalid. So not all his action, but the actions in between that time, specific time of Salat al-Asr, those are the acts that are considered to be invalid. As Ulama mentioned that if you were to say or come to the conclusion that all the person did, and I mentioned habita amalu, that all his actions invalid, then that's an act which is the person leaving Islam. So the personal actions or completely all his actions are invalid, then that is like saying that the person have done something which is either kufr or shirk. So when a person, all his action is invalid, then that generally means that the person fell into something that excommunicate the person from Islam. And that's not the case as they mentioned here with Jumhur of the ulama. There's a view among some of the ulama that they're all concerned that from this, the person who, from this, it shows that with some of the ulama, that the one who leave even one salat have left the full of Islam. Man taraka salat al-asr faqad habita amalu. So of the ulama who have the view that by leaving the salat, the person have left the full of Islam. So they mentioned that by the person leaving just one salah. So between themselves as to the person who have abandoned or leave salat, is that the person left the fold of Islam, that amongst that view is those who take the view that even the person was to leave one salah, then the person have left, and I mean the person have left one salat by out of negligence. As they mentioned, the person who intentionally leave one salat, for them, that's kufr without any doubt. That's kufr without any doubt. As for the one who intentionally leave the salat, and that's the general view of the ulama. But I mentioned that in this case, the person who, out of negligence, that they have left Salatul Asr, then the person, his actions are invalid by way of the person who have left Islam. So the person who leave away any salah, then this will be his consequence. And he have left the full of Islam. But there's a discussion between the ulama as to that the person who have left salat, is he considered to be a Muslim or not? That's of the discussion between the ulama. So they mentioned that this concerns the person of those, as we mentioned, that the person actions that are said to be invalid are those actions related to that particular salat, So that those actions of the dunya will not count for the person during this time. Then they mentioned regarding concern of a hadith of this nature that we have mentioned that specifies Salatul Asr, that a person who missed Salatul Asr, then these are some of the severe consequences that they mentioned that, that as I said, because they see it as the most preferred of the salat, and it's Salatul Wusta, so it comes with consequence of the person leaving it. It comes with severe consequence in the person leaving the most preferred of the salat. The person leaving the most preferred of the salat, they come with severe consequences, as these hadith indicate. As that's concerning what is mentioned regarding this particular hadith, of those things that are mentioned regarding this hadith, and I mentioned that you find that especially concerning Salatul Asr and also Salatul Fajr are to be discussed in the next hadith, that those hadith that those are considered to be the most preferred or the best among the salawat, and that's why you find that hadith that mention their virtue, that they are more, and also the person missing them, that is more severe. That the consequence of missing of these salat, then the consequence become more severe. So that's concerning. So they mention overall regarding concerning that this hadith, in line with the hadith before, that the person they mentioned here, what is they mentioned regarding that of Salatul Asr, the person being complacent. Well, they mentioned that with Salatul Asr, that in most cases the person that they are mustayqiz, that a person somewhat they're normally awake. With Salatul Asr, in most people are awake during that time, so they have no excuse. And you might find a person with Salatul Fajr have an excuse because of noon, trying to get up. But as for Salatul Asr, why the consequence is more severe in missing that salat, because most people, you find that people normally that they are awake during the salah. So there's no excuse for a person missing Salatul Asr. No excuse for a person missing Salat. So the person can say, I was sleeping. In most people are awake. So there's no excuse in missing Salatul Asr. So why the hadith come as these hadith are more severe for the one who missed Salat al-Asr and someone complacent regarding this particular Salat. But also it shows regarding the hadith that not being complacent regarding Salatul Asr or any other Salah. So from the hadith, it shows that overall, that one should not be complacent regarding Salatul Asr or any other of the compulsory Salat. So the person try to pray them as quick as possible. The mentioned, Bakkaru fi bi Salatul Asr. Try to be hasty and to perform them as early as possible with Salatul Asr. And this also would apply to any other salah. Aywa.
قال المؤلف رحمه الله, chapter 12, the superiority of the Asr prayer. Hadith 342, narrated by Jarir radiallahu anhu. We were with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he looked at the moon on a full moon night and said, certainly you will see your Lord as if you see this moon, and you will have no trouble in seeing him. If so, if you can avoid missing through sleep or business a salah before the sunrise, a salah before sunset, you must do so. He then recited Allah's statement, English rendering being, and glorify the praises of your Lord before the rising of the sun and before its setting.
And the author, that's hadith?
No, there's a second hadith. You want to read that?
Okay, the second one come after. So that's for the first hadith I mentioned here. So after the first hadith I mentioned regarding the hadith of Jarir ibn Abdullah anhu, that he mentioned on the Prophet called that فَنَظَرَ إِلَىٰ الْقَمَرِ, some narration means little butter, that the Prophet that he looked to the qamar, and so looking at the moon in the night, and some narration mentioned concerning that was little butter, that it's a full moon night. Then it mentioned that the Prophet called, then he said regarding this matter, إِنَّكُمْ سَتَرَوْنَ رَبُّكُمْ كَمَا تَرَوْا هَذَا قَمَرٌ, that as for you mean concerning the believers. So in this case that he's addressing the Sahaba, but also by addressing the believers. So they mentioned regarding that, so that he mentioned that you see your Lord as you see Al-Qamar. So they mentioned that to the Prophet resembling that the viewing with the viewing, not per se of what is being seen. So from this hadith they mentioned, from the first part of the hadith, it discussed a matter regarding Aqidah. So the first part of the hadith, it mentioned a matter regarding Aqidah. The Prophet then mentioned, إِنَّكُمْ سَتَرَوْنَ رَبُّكُمْ كَمَا تَرَوْنَ هَذَا الْقَمَرِ. So they mentioned that this particular this section of the hadith discussed a matter regarding Aqidah, which is the matter that is discussed between the ulama, or the matter that is mentioned in Aqidah, which is the matter regarding Ar-Ru'yatullah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Ar-Ru'yatullah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the seeing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the matter that this section of hadith mentioned, that regarding the scene of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned, إِنَّكُمْ سَتَرَوْنَ رَبَّكُمْ, that it mentioned to see your Lord. So it mentioned regarding the viewing, the seeing, the viewing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they mentioned Yawm al-Qiyamah. So this is in that, so this hadith is regarding the seeing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Yawm al-Qiyamah. That the ulama mentioned regarding as for the seeing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that it is specific to Yawm al-Qiyamah. As for those places that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be seen, Yawm al-Qiyamah, they mention Urasat, Yawm al-Qiyamah, on the plains where everyone will gather. That also in Jannah. So those people enter Jannah will see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Jannah. So those of those places or stations that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be seen, Yawm al-Qiyamah. And for the first station of Urasat, Yawm al-Qiyamah, at the place where everyone will be gathering place, on the plains, that they discuss that the people will be in three groups: al-mu'min, wal-munafiq, wal-kafir. So the people will be into three groups, or the people fall into three. Either one is a mu'min, yani believer, kafir, disbeliever, or third, munafiq. So the ulama discuss concerning with this discussion regarding at that station, at that point, well, who would see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? The view of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would apply to all or to some. So with the view of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at that station before entering Jannah, the people of Jannah, or entering the Nar, the people of the Nar, the viewing before this, that does it apply to the believers only, or are the kuffar and the munafiq included in the scene of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So you have a khilaf between ulama on that matter, and that matter is discussed in the book of Aqidah in more details. But you have that discussion where, in general, that some of the ulama take the view that only the believer will see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A second view, it only applies, the view of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would be only for the believers and the munafiq. As the munafiq, he claimed Islam. Just like the fact that he claimed Islam, then he's included of those who see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As for the kuffar, no. Then another view, all that, all we see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That the believers, the munafiq, and the kuffar will all see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at that station, but at that point, so you have that khilaf between the ulama on that matter. Then, so that's concerning Yawm al-Qiyamah. Then our next discussion is the view of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fi dunya. Will Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be seen in the dunya? So will Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be seen in the dunya? That on that matter, that Ahl Sunnah view, no, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not be seen in the dunya. But then you find that the ghulat at-tasawwuf, Ahl Tasawwuf, that the people who are said to be the Sufis, that they are up amongst them, the ghulat. So the extreme amongst some of the extreme of the Sufi, which there are various levels of extreme amongst them. But of those ones going to somewhat believe that they can see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this dunya. So the ghulat. So the ghulat among the Ahl Tasawwuf of the Sufi, I said they come in different degrees. Of the one they claim strange things. They claim strange things. So amongst the claim, among some, that they can see, or they are the wali, or the sheikh, or whatever the person is, or the rajulun saleh, that they can see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this dunya. So you have a different extreme. So to the extent even some of them all concern the person who is the wali, or the person who is that level of concern of wilaya, that is the sharia of Islam is lifted from him. So regarding salat, zakat, and the rules of Islam does not apply to him anymore. Because his level of wilaya, his level of piety, or closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that he have reached that stage where the rules of Islam does not apply to him. And it's not like Khidr. So it's the case like Khidr and the likes, that the person have reached that stage where the rules of the common people does not apply to them. And that Allah mustan regarding that belief. But they have the belief of the ghulat al-tasawwuf. Ghulat al-tasawwuf. So regarding concerning the seen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with Ahl Sunnah, they affirm the seen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Yawm al-Qiyamah. So Ahl Sunnah, they agree that they affirm the seen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Yawm al-Qiyamah, and they mention that you find over 20 plus Sahabi have mentioned this matter. So they said the Hadith mutawatir. So a Hadith al-mutawatir, amongst those topics that are covered regarding Hadith mutawatir, is the view of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where over 20 plus Sahaba have narrated different narration of seen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Yawm al-Qiyamah. So they said no, this is considered to be mutawatir, that the only ones who reject this of seen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Yawm al-Qiyamah, that they have one, as mentioned by An-Nawawi and others, that you have the Jahmiyyah, they reject the seen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Who else? Man? Ash'ari. Okay. And the Mu'tazila, so we have the Jahmiyyah, the Mu'tazila. Then An-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentioned that others that he includes concerning Imamiyya, meaning Ashia, that also they reject the seen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Yawm al-Qiyamah. Then also they mentioned that you have a group amongst the Khawarij. So amongst the Khawarij, that there's a view amongst some of them that they reject the seen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then also some mention Al-Murji'ah, or some of the Murji'ah, some of those that of the Murji'ah, that they reject Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being seen in the Akhirah. So those are the groups that are mentioned that but more that have this view. Of the more renowned amongst them are the Mu'tazila with Jahmiyyah. Of the more renowned amongst them are the Mu'tazila and the Jahmiyyah, that they reject the seen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Yawm al-Qiyamah. So they mentioned that based upon this, that the books of the Mu'tazila, that they are that the books of the Mu'tazila, that we still have some of their books up until today, in the form of the books in Usul al-Fiqh, and also in the books of Tafsir. So the views of the Mu'tazila is somewhat can be found in the books of Tafsir. You find that some of those who have explained the Quran, that they are Mu'tazila, and they defend their views. So they kind of somewhat, they would record or mention and defend their views in their works. And of them, of those ones, Zamakhshari. So Zamakhshari, in his book, what is it called? Kashaf. That he has a book in Tafsir, and but he's Mu'tazili, and he defends the views of the Mu'tazila in that work. Even though the book is in print of Zamakhshari, but he is known to be concerning in Lugha, that for his efforts regarding things of Lugha, then the ulama give him a bly, but things regarding Aqidah, then they give him an X. So that a book of is that they are mentioned that is not to be read except for student mutamakkin, and not concerning the book of Zamakhshari, that not just any student, the person who understands Aqidah very well, and Zamakhshari, because of his strength in the language, is able can present it in a subtle way where a person would not detect that. So he has that skill. So he has that skill of presenting things in a subtle way where a person would not be able to detect it unless the person understand well. But even though you find that, so you find that other books that came after, that the books of the Asha'ira and the likes, that they can somewhat still benefit. They use a lot of Zamakhshari works in their books of tafsir. To the extent you find that even some went to the books of Zamakhshari to just discuss or to highlight or to refute the points of Aqidah specifically in that book. You have books just on that topic to refute matters regarding Ittizaliyah in his tafsir. So, as we mentioned, that of those who reject the sin of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of the main ones, Jahmiyyah and the Mu'tazila, and these are points that ulama mentioned regarding that the person who rejects the sin of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that they mentioned this is kufr. That this is an act of kufr. So this is an act of kufr for a person to reject the sin of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as a hadith and the text for it is numerous. That we have sufficient text which is a hadith mutawatir and ayat. So the nusus, the text in this is by way of Quran wa Sunnah and a hadith mutawatir. So the person who reject this after being made clear to them, then that's an act of kufr. It's an act of kufr. But as we said, the first part of the hadith it mentioned matters pertaining to Aqidah. Then it mentioned regarding وَلَا تَدَامُونَ فِي رُؤْيَتِي. Then it mentioned that tadamuna could be read both two ways. Tadamun by way of shadda al-amim, or tadamun in the way of without takhfif. And they mentioned the meaning concerning that you won't have to crowd each other to see in this ruhya. They don't need to crowd and block out each other, and that each person on his own, that's not that one we see a lot, that the viewing will be clear. You have clear viewing, or that you won't need to be blocking out each other in seeing of this ru'ya. Then I mentioned man istata'a minkum an la taghlu ala salat qabla tulu' al-shams. They mentioned that is as-salat qabla tulu' al-shams. They mentioned that is a wa qabla ghurubiha, that is salat al-asr wa salat al-fajr. That is salat al-asr and salat al-fajr. So as-salat al-asr, salat al-fajr, that's a qabla tulu' al-shams. That's the salat al-fajr. And qabla ghurubiha, that is salat al-asr. So salat al-fajr before the sun rise, and salat asr before the sun sets. So those are those two salawat. So that's concerning that matter they discuss regarding this particular hadith. So the hadith it shows regarding the Muslim that that it mentioned that from the hadith that yuhafidhun, that they try to preserve these salat and protect these salat, which is salat al-asr and salat al-fajr. So can someone put effort in salat al-fajr and also salat al-asr, and also by the person who is consistent and fulfilling of these salat, then of those things the person is an asbab, it's a means for the person to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So of the means to view Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the person who preserve these two salawat, al-asr and salat al-fajr. So again, it shows the excellence of salat al-asr, and of the reason behind what some of the ulama all, that it is salat al-wusta and of the most virtuous of the salat. So and also it shows the hadith overall, as we mentioned, that ثبوت رؤية المؤمنين, that the believers see their Lord في الجنة, and also on يوم القيامة. That hadith it proves the believers seeing their Lord يوم القيامة and also in Jannah. What time is it?
Nearly 15:15.
Okay, that clock. Huh? Hey. With the muazzin.
It's 2 minutes left.
Oh, okay.
There.
It's 14 now.
He's there, you can't see him. He's around the corner there, you can't see him.
Oh, okay. As we mentioned, that so overall concern is hadith, that it shows regarding concerning that matters pertaining to aqidah, which is the view of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also there's asbab, so of ways of the person kind of somewhat getting, and I mentioned that the view of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ru'yat Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is the a'zam na'im in Jannah. So the greatest of na'im of Jannah is the view of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is the scene of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's nothing that is more greater than this. So there's nothing more greater than the scene of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Yawm al-Qiyamah. So it shows that the great virtue and the reward for a person who's preserve their salat al-fajr, and second salat al-asr, that the reward that goes with them, that they are great to the extent where a person reward in the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where a person would be able, or this is the means for a person to view Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by them being protecting there or being consistent in these particular salat. تفضل شيخ. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam rasulillah wa ba'd. So also the ulama mentioned regarding that ittifaq between as-salaf as-salih fi talaqqi hadha hadith. So you have an agreement between the salaf as-salih in regarding accepting this particular hadith that have been mentioned. To the extent they mentioned that Yazid ibn Harun, that have stated man kadhaba bi hadha hadith, that one who rejects this hadith, فهو بريء من الله ورسوله, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Rasul is free from this person, that that person is free from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his messenger. So it shows the severity that, as I mentioned, that over 20 plus Sahaba have narrated this particular hadith or this matter, this topic regarding the scene of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When I mentioned regarding concerning that hadith, فَنِسْتَطَعْتُمْ أَنْ لَا تُغْلَبُوا, that I mentioned تُغْلَبُوا, that I mentioned that one should not, regarding this matter, then تُغْلَبُوا على صلاة قبل طلوع الشمس, that a person should not be overcome by things of the dunya. So the person, regarding these salawat, that a person doesn't become blinded or a person become too involved, too overly busy with things of the dunya, where the person, he missed these salat. So the person tried somewhat to preserve these salat, so not to become things of diversion or obstruction regarding these particular salat. So whatever the person is involved in, that a person the person try to make time that they pray these salat. So salat al-asr and salat al-fajr, not to allow things of the dunya to get in between you and the salat, salat al-asr and salat al-fajr. So we put emphasis on these salat, put emphasis on this particular salat. Then they mentioned that one narrator, who's Ismail, one of the narrators of the hadith, that is mentioned, that he mentioned when he mentioned, if'alu la tafutannakum al-fajr, or la tafutannakum, that he mentioned, one of the narrators mentioned in this hadith, he mentioned that you should not hold to the salat, carry through on the salat, and not allow the salat to miss you, and not allow the salat or these two salat to miss you. So it shows regarding that the emphasis is that the person ensuring that they pray these two salat, not allow themselves to miss or to become complacent regarding these salat, as mentioned, and because of the consequence that comes with it of the person, as we mentioned before, missing Salatul Asr, and also of the reward that comes to the person who maintain the Salat Al-Fajr and Salat Al-Asr. So that's concerning what is mentioned regarding this particular hadith. In general, we go to the next hadith as it's just a repetition of the first.
قال المؤلف رحمه الله Hadith 343 narrated by Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. Allah's Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, angels come to you in succession by night and day, and all of them get together at the time of the Fajr and Asr. Those who have passed the night with you or stayed with you ascend to the heavens and Allah asks them, though He knows everything about you, in what state did you leave my slaves? The angels reply, when we left them they were offering the salah, and when we reached them they were offering the salah.
Okay, so this hadith again that is mentioned here, that regarding concerning hadith, it discussed concerning يَتَعَاقَبُونَ فِيكُمْ الْمَلَائِكَةِ, that the angels that they gathered at a certain time during the day and a certain time during the night. Then I mentioned that of those times is Al-Fajr and also Salat Al-Ashr, so the angels that they'll gather. So it shows regarding Ithbat, regarding concerning the existence of the angels, so this proves the existence of the angels. Also it proves regarding the angels of time that they will gather, and of those times during the day and during the night, and that time, there's still the specific time concerning the time of Salatul Fajr and the time of Salatul Asr. So the angel they'll rotate their service. So the angel also, they have different responsibilities and duties. So of those angels who somewhat that they report back regarding certain the actions of the servants. So of those regarding the personal action regarding is salat and the likes. Then I mentioned those angels that they go back. ثُمَّ يَعْرُجُ الَّذِينَ تَابُوا فِيكُمْ. Then can somewhat go back. The angel report concerning the actions of the servant. Then I mentioned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned كَيْفَ تَرَكْتُمْ عِبَادِي, asked concerning, oh, you have left my servants. Oh, you have left my servant. Then I mentioned فَيَقُولُونَ, that the angel responds تَرَكْتُكُمْ وَهُمْ يُصَلُّونَ, that we have left them, and we left them while they were praying. وَأَتَيْنَاهُمْ وَهُمْ يُصَلُّونَ. So when we left, they were in salat, and also when we went back and approached them, when we went back to that, they were also again in salat. So that so it shows regarding that the angels mention or report back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala regarding the action of the servants, that they are always in salat, which is those two salat, al-fajr and salat al-asr. And those are the times that the angel can somewhere use the word, when you use the word they change like shift, that they'll change their shifts at that particular time. So at the time that the people are in, the servants are in salah, whether it is salat al-fajr or salat al-asr, but those are the times that the angel will be. So it shows regarding concern, as we mentioned, that al-iman bi-wujud al-malaika, that it shows that we have to believe in the angels as and that also that they have different duties, and of that they carry duties of reporting the actions of the servant. And also it shows regarding that matters regarding Salatul Fajr and Salatul Asr, that their excellence is that's the time that the angels that they change shift, one leave and one set they return, and of those things that the time where the servants are carrying out their salat, the time the servants are carrying out their salat. So it shows the excellence of those salat and that particular time, and also the excellence of those servants that are found in salat. And it is reported back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that this is the act that they are carried out. These are the acts that they are carried out. As I mentioned, كَيْفَ تَرَكْتُمْ عِبَادِي, how did you left my servant? So it shows that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asking regarding the state of his servant. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is aware of the action of the servant, but the angel took it somewhat to report back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala what they have seen. So that inshallah ta'ala, so that inshallah ta'ala will end this session and continue or end this lesson and continue in the next. So today will be the last of this lesson until after what we refer to as the new year. So until after the next few weeks, then inshallah ta'ala will resume. So this will be the last lesson for the next couple of weeks, wabillahi ta'ala tawfiq. I would kind of somewhat encourage our brother regarding concerning with that you might find